neighborhood improvement services as a part of our equitable community engagement work. Understanding history and the history of our neighborhoods is important to create a better future together. This is the eighth in our series, and you can view the previous videos on YouTube, on the city's YouTube, as well as on the TV. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. All right, and at this point, I will turn it over to the former police chief, Stephen Chalmers, and he will take it from here. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Okay, thank you very much, Alexis. And before we get started, I would like to just take an opportunity to thank all of you for this series of community stories. I've had an opportunity to watch all of the stories up to this point, and I want to commend you for the job that you've done. I want to commend Constance Stansel, my friend from Neighborhood Improvement Services. We have a long history of working in community together, and she's always done a great job in pouring her heart out and getting out in the community and making things happen for people. And along with Laura, Cheryl, Fallon, Alexis, Jenny, all of you guys have done a great job working with us to allow us to tell our community story about the Bottom, where we all grew up, and a place where we hold real fond memories of, and really always be close in our hearts. We've put together a panel uh, this afternoon to give you different perspectives. I'm not going to go and introduce each one of those at this point. I'll allow each one of those individuals to do that once they start. We are still also encouraging everyone to go to the Q&A and go to the chat. And we have a lot of viewers on today, and we'd like to hear their comments and just see how the questions they have, and also share their memories. We're going to be starting again with Henry Patterson, and I'm going to allow him to introduce himself and get the program started. But again, thank all of you guys, and again, give my best to Constance.
They just said when she was born.
Good evening, everyone. It's with great pleasure that I'm here today to talk about a community that we grew up in and I'm so fond of and still fond of to this day. My name is Henry Patterson, and I lived on 907 Willard Street, as well as other areas of Willard Street. And our streets, I was surrounded by Cobb Street, Matthew Street, Carrington Street, Johnson Street, South Street, and Proctor Street were closest streets to me. But it was a community of educators, musicians, medical professionals, sports stars, community activists, factory workers, homemakers, in-service workers, Christian leaders, with St. Matthew's CME Church and St. Teresa Catholic Church being principal points of service. And it was a village of caring, nurturing, loving, hardworking Christian people who helped raise us to be the men and women that we've become today. So I just want to thank them and the Bottom experience that I had for helping me to become the man that I am today. And as you see here, there's some of the houses, housing areas in the Bottom, which produced quite a bit, many great sports stars, educators, and the like. But we were children who were surrounded with love and protection and good etiquette. And as a lot of us like to say, we didn't know that we were poor until later on in life. Miss Mittie Austin was principally responsible for educating a lot of the kids in that neighborhood in her, we call her fish market daycare, kindergarten. But she educated quite a few rising stars that came from that neighborhood in her kindergarten and daycare. But as you see, the neighborhood, it was a flourishing neighborhood, and we thought that we were just as good, if not better, than anyone else. Miss Mittie Austin had a kindergarten. Her brother, Mr. Frank Howard Austin, he was another great educator from our neighborhood. We had others also that were into education. We had a corroborated neighborhood of parents and famous people such as Ernie Barnes. And that's one of his paintings there. Most famous one called The Sugar Shack. And he was not only an artist, but he was also a pro football player. And all of the people we've mentioned here are high school graduates of Hillside High School, and went on to North Carolina Central College. Now it was North Carolina College then, now North Carolina Central University. He and his family also owned the fish market in our neighborhood at one time, and all that served the neighborhood. And we also had other guys like Billy Hayes. Most people fondly know him. Well, you have a whole group of them right there. Educators, and that was Miss Mittie Austin in her class, and I'm in that class picture right there, third row, about center there. So she was a very strict and stern, loving, caring educator of us kids in her kindergarten. And we learned very much. When we hit the first grade, we hit the ground running. And then we had, like I say, you saw Ernie Barnes. We had Billy Hayes, and Steve Chalmers. That's Billy Hayes right there. And the other picture is Ray Shines, who was a professional baseball player out of our neighborhood, played the Montreal Expos. So we had a good amount of people famous that came out of our neighborhood. Pete Hayes, Tommy Lee Wilson, Gustav Jones, and Ray Shines you see on the scene there, and Robert McAdams. All these guys were pro baseball, pro football players, and great coaches and coaches in the neighborhood and all. And also we had business owners and people who provided businesses in our neighborhood. And you see right there, that's one of my good friends and classmate, Dr. Arthur Boyd, who is an MD and also owns business, a Star Beverage, and a chicken box area right there was another business that started in our neighborhood and spread out to be 7 buildings. And now it's just one building still remaining. But that was a great business in our neighborhood and people who started those businesses. And we had Mr. Grover Birthday and Mr. W.A. Amy, who were business owners in the funeral business. And you see pictures there. They were very renowned in our neighborhood and very well known by everyone and all families and all. So, and we had other people in our neighborhood who contributed greatly to the neighborhood. We had professional nurses and doctors and architects, all over the neighborhood. We had Mr. Powell, who owned a restaurant and a place of relaxation. We had Miss Ann Atwater, who moved to our city at an early age, but got renowned in the city of Durham for her activists and her activities in the nationwide. So we had a great complexity of people who helped raise us and who gave us good teachings and encouraged us to be the best we could be. And we was called the bottom. This is one picture of the reunion. We were called the bottom, but a lot of great people came out of the bottom, rose to the top. And I thank you for my time.
Okay, after Henry, we're going to allow Archie Corbitt, who grew up in that neighborhood, to talk about his memories and his experience in the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Steve. You are correct. I did grow up in the bottom, and currently I have retired as the Director of Consumer Affairs for the government of the U.S. Virgin Islands. And I've lived here now for over 40 years, but let's be clear, I am not from the Virgin Islands. I grew up in Durham, North Carolina, and proudly claim to be not from Southside, but I grew up in the bottom.
Amen.
And you're absolutely right, Henry, that it was called the bottom, but the bottom was the top.
Amen.
I was very blessed living in the bottom. Oh, and by the way, I grew up at 918 Scout Drive. And it disturbs me in Durham now because I always find myself driving down Scout Drive, but the addresses, the street numbers, the house numbers go from 916 to 920. It makes me a little uncomfortable that there is no longer a 918. There's a house in the same position, but it's numbered different. It's kind of like when I drive down Fayetteville Street and realize there's no longer a Lincoln Hospital. Am I a non-person now? But anyway, back to the bottom. Yes, I was very blessed to grow up in the bottom to some amazing, wonderful parents. And many of you recall possibly the most famous member of our immediate family, Mrs. Corbitt from Hillside High School, chairman of the English department. You know her as an educator, and Mom always said that even as a little child, whenever they would play school, she had to be the teacher. That was in her heart. However, not everybody realizes that education was not just in Mom's heart, it was in her blood. You see, my granddad, who lived at 100 East Enterprise, right there, the corner of Enterprise and Scout Drive, he dropped out of school around the 5th grade to help support the family. At the age of, and he accepted a position at Liggett & Myers Tobacco Company to help support the family. And at the age of 65, he retired from Liggett & Myers. Now that says a little bit about dedication and commitment, and hopefully I learned some from him. However, what he and his wife preached to their 4 children was that you will get an education. You will have a better life than I. And that was not a question. And any of you who knew my grandmother understood that that was not a question. So my mom did complete her master's in English, and as I said, was the chairman of the English department there at Hillside. However, she has a brother with a master's degree, who after a career at IBM where he retired, then he returned to education, and he retired as assistant principal right there in Durham City Schools. They have a sister whose PhD is in business. And she's retired as a professor in the business school at NCCU. They have a brother who's, well, let's see, he did not complete the master's program. However, I'm sorry, the doctoral program. However, he is recognized as one of the foremost authorities in the nation in computer science. He is professor emeritus at Syracuse University and professor emeritus at Oneonta State College in New York. And those four people had parents who raised them in the bottom. A lot of wonderful things came out of the bottom. And it could go on and on. However, any conversation concerning any Black community in the United States is not complete, of course, unless you include the church. Now, my family started out originally right there on Pine Street, now Roxborough, at Mount Vernon. We were the Southern Baptist. But in 1962, my father decided that he would like his family to be Catholic. We converted to Catholicism. Right there at St. Teresa's, we were blessed to meet a young parish priest by the name of Joseph Lawson Howes, an amazing individual who touched many people. And one of my favorite examples of that touching, it was a little interesting to find that some of those who were referred to as bottom boys, some of those individuals who were not unfamiliar with incarceration, they were finding themselves on Sunday morning in church, in shirt and tie. They would sit in the back, but Father Howe's influence touched everybody. The photograph, well, the two photographs, basically the same, and I have to thank, oh my goodness, thank Deborah, and I don't remember Deborah's married name. She was Deborah Wilson when we were at St. Teresa's for the photograph, the earlier one. But those two pictures are about 40, 50 years apart. I was blessed to locate Father House, who later became Bishop House. By the way, he is Bishop Emeritus for the Diocese of Biloxi. He is the first Black bishop appointed by the Catholic Church in the 20th century. He went on to make quite a name for himself. We were introduced to him at the bottom, and we were blessed because of that relationship. But amazing, wonderful people, as everyone seems to agree on, came out of the bottom. And a different example that touches me greatly is at 916, there was a gentleman there, Mr. Cobb, who was our next door neighbor. It amazed me to learn that Mr. Cobb was a doughboy in World War I. North Carolina at the time did not allow those of the wrong complexion to serve their country. He had to leave the state in order to volunteer to serve his country. I didn't know this until as a child playing under the house with his grandsons and ran across his footlocker, and with these hands was able to touch artifacts from his footlocker from World War I. And I don't know how much of a coincidence it is that one of his grandsons today, Alfonso Mathison Jr, is retired lieutenant colonel in the US Army, helicopter pilot there. Sometimes it's a little more than genetics. He followed his grandfather's footsteps. And we all, as was mentioned by Henry, that we are all the product of our environment. We are all who we are because of what we learned in the bottom. In a conversation with my brother not too long ago, younger than I, he was asking one day, who was the man who sat on the front porch every day wearing suspenders and necktie? And I thought about it for a little while, and I couldn't imagine who it would have been until I dug out a photograph of our great grandfather in his suspenders and necktie. And I asked myself, is that the reason that I religiously wear suspenders and necktie today? I'd forgotten the experience with him, but it's who I am. That's just the way that those of us who are fortunate, that's the way that we develop, the way that we mature from exposure to others. But the bottom itself had a host of individuals who were successful, and many of us today who leading successful lives because of their influence. And I think that's my input for the bottom discussion.
All right, thank you, Archie. And I'm just kind of checking on some of the remarks that we're getting in, and want to again encourage everyone to make certain they're turning off their mics if they're not speaking. They're saying they're getting some background noises and everything. So we're going to move on, and I think Bill, you're next, and we're going to give Bill about 5 to 6 minutes to kind of talk about his experience in the bottom, and then we do want to get to some of the comments, and if anyone has questions, please post those so we can address those. Any memories you want to actually reflect on, also post. So Bill, how about giving us about 5 to 6 minutes, please?
Okay. Good morning. Good afternoon. My name is William Stanley, and people in the bottom call me Bill Jr. My mother's name is Frances Parker. I was raised by my mom and my father were divorced. So I spent some time with my dad down in East Durham. And when I was down there, I attended Ebenezer Baptist Church. But for the most part, I attended Mount Vernon Baptist Church up there on Pine Street that later became Roxbury Street. I lived on Hillside Avenue. In fact, I always thought the bottom was at the bottom of Hillside Avenue where it dumped into South Street. Hillside dumped down there, and Chestnut Street and Fargo and Scout Drive, it all just kind of ended up down at what we call the bottom. There was a field down there that belonged to the Catholic Church that we kind of used as a de facto park. That's where we played baseball and football and tag and anything else that we could do down there. The other interesting thing about the bottoms, they didn't pave the streets down there. We were surrounded by paved streets. Pine Street was paved, Lakewood Avenue was paved, Enterprise was paved, but everything in that quadrant down there was rocks, and when it rained, it was red mud down at the bottom. Most of us lived in wooden houses with tin roofs. We lived in a duplex that had 3 rooms. That was a rental, of course. And I remember that back then our rent was like, I don't know, probably like $9 a week or something like that, which was still a lot of money. The interesting thing is, if you walked down Lakewood and crossed over the railroad tracks, you were in Forest Hills, which is one of the richest neighborhoods in Durham, North Carolina. And at one time it was a golf course down there, but then they started Hope Valley Golf Course, which is further out. We did our shopping mostly downtown Durham. You could almost walk to downtown Durham from where we lived. So the Main Street Durham was a bustling community before they started building malls around that area. We did our grocery shopping at Peter Pan, which was over on Pine Street. We walked over there and got our groceries, and they would deliver it on a bicycle for many times. The houses down there, for the most part, were heated by either oil or coal. A coal man would come through the area and sell big bags of coal, and most of us had coal burning stoves, at least one in the house, and most of us had an oil burning stove when we could get oil to burn. Kerosene was the fuel for that. The bottom was a little different. Now, we hear about all the people that came out of there, but a lot of us came out of there at a little bit of a handicap, because that was really the bottom economically, generally. And a lot of the people down there had bad reputations for being thugs, and so they kind of branded all of us with that group. You know how that works. And a lot of people on other sides of town would not come to the bottom unless you lived down there. So a lot of great people came out of the bottom. You heard some of the names of the people that came out of the bottom. We didn't have electronic games like kids have today. We played tag and jump rope and rock teacher and stoplight and Simon Said and baseball and other kinds of sports. That was our entertainment. We knew everybody in the bottom. People didn't lock their doors because nobody was going to break in your house. In fact, they talked about Mittie Austin's nursery school and kindergarten. There were no kindergartens back then. It was not a requirement for us to go to kindergarten, but she gave a lot of children a head start. And in her fish market, she would come, if she had extra fish, she'd come in your back door and just leave it in your refrigerator, and you paid her when you could. I know my little brothers went to her kindergarten, and they had a big head start when they went to school. Most of us went to Whittitt for junior high. We either went to Pearson or Spalding for elementary school, and we went to Hillside for high school. There were two high schools in Durham when I grew up. One was Hillside, which was the black school, and Durham High, which is a white school. And I did not go to school with a white student until I got to North Carolina Central University. They were really segregated. In fact, everything was basically segregated in Durham. And so kids from all different walks of life had to go to our schools. There were no private schools. I don't care how much money you had to go to Hillside, which was good because we got to interact with all classes of people within our race. We went to school with kids whose parents were business owners, worked for North Carolina Mutual, owned a movie theater, owned restaurants, barber colleges, and all of those different things. So interesting neighborhood. Now about myself, I graduated from North Carolina Central, and I went to, I took a job with Procter & Gamble, moved over to St. Louis, and then eventually ended up Milwaukee and also Oakland, California. Now I'm outside of Atlanta, Georgia. I was elected president of my fraternity, Phi Beta Sigma, in 1993. As it turned out, I was elected at a conclave in Raleigh, North Carolina, which is 27 miles from where I grew up. What you see are pictures of, I represent the organization this year, well, last year, I think it was, crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge. This is an annual event commemorating Bloody Sunday. John Lewis is my fraternity brother, as you can see him pictured in the upper right hand corner. And Bill Clinton is an honorary member of our fraternity, and I was there for his induction ceremony. So many of us excelled in the bottom because we had to prove that we were as good as anybody else in Durham. So it caused us to work harder, study harder, and excel. Archie Corbitt taught me how to play chess. And I used to go up Scout Drive and play chess with Archie. And so we learned from each other, and we learned a lot in our schools because our teachers nurtured us. And I think we got a great education because the teachers that taught us could have been doing something better, but because of the racist nature of society, they were stifled and had to teach us. I was born in Lincoln Hospital, although Duke Hospital is in Durham, one of the best medical centers in Durham, but most Black people had to go to Lincoln for its medical needs. What you see on the right is Lincoln Hospital, and on the left you see Hillside High School. If you got sick near Lincoln Hospital, and if you weren't dying, they would take you near Duke, they would take you straight over to Lincoln Hospital. I was in Durham after they tore down Lincoln, celebrating my birthday up on the vacant lot that used to be Lincoln, and I found a brick. And I brought that brick back to Atlanta and I built it into my house. So I have a little bit of my heritage where I live for Lincoln Hospital. So there's a lot of the bottom. I remember it. I have fond memories of it, but I also have some memories that I would like to forget about it. But I thank God that I was able to rise above my station and do well because of my education at Hillside and in North Carolina Central University.
All right, thank you, Bill. We're going to move right on. We're going to move next to Mr. Elvert Dorsey. And in the bottom, as everyone's kind of indicated, everybody had a little nickname. And of course, we called him Bay. And so we're gonna let Bay Dorsey start.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to speak here. And Steve, I really do appreciate that. Yes, I think a lot of us did have nicknames, and it's fortunate how those things stick with you over the years. A lot of times people never knew your first name, but they knew your nickname. In my situation, I grew up at 911 South Street, loved it there, had some great neighbors, experienced some great things where it made me a stronger person. One of the situations that I would like to share was I had an opportunity to work at the service station that was owned or leased at the time. We never knew which one it was, by Fireball. For those of you all who grew up in the bottom, that was his nickname, Fireball, because he used to like to race all the time. And he had a service station that he would allow us the opportunity to come and work at his service station, which allowed us to be groomed in a manner in which we learned how to be good customer service. At that time, if you recall, those folks that bought gas at service stations, you had the service people had to go out and pump the gas. No one ever got out of their car to pump gas as they do today at the self-service areas. But Fireball allowed us the opportunity to learn how to take care of customers, treat them really special, and show them that we wanted them to return to this business. And his mother knew that he was making an impression on a lot of us, and she would invite us over to her house sometimes, especially when she was trying to show Fireball how well he had influenced people. Now, Fireball had friends like Alexander McNair. They had guys, that he had a 56 Chevrolet. And my favorite car, of course, is a 56 Chevrolet. And I learned to drive a standard shift car by driving his in the parking lot. We used to wash that car 5 or 6 times a day. And he loved it. And that was the way that we showed our respect for him. Now, for those of you all who may not remember, Fireball service station was right there beside Rigsby Tire Sale, which was there on Lakewood. And this was such a wonderful thing for me, because not only when I left there, I had to walk by Miss Lucille Horn's grocery store, and she'd be standing there and she would always speak, and she knew your first name. Now, she never called me Bay, she called me Elvert. And I even had some friends to say, I didn't know your name was Elvert. And so it just gave you an opportunity to learn and to feel as though you were a part of something. My mother worked in Hope Valley. She worked for the president of First Federal Bank years ago, which is no longer in Durham. And we were allowed to come to the neighborhood when I was in the 5th grade. And we enjoyed. 911 South Street, we finally moved to 200 West Piedmont up on the corner, before eventually, after I left to go to college and return with my degree at North Carolina Central, we moved out of the community. But I wanted to just highlight Fireball, Frederick White, who allowed us the opportunity to make us a stronger person, not only with our personal skills, with our customer service skills, but knowing how to treat and talk to people, which I really appreciate today. Outside of that, I went on to North Carolina Central like Bill. Bill was there a year ahead of me, majored in business at North Carolina Central, enjoyed it, met my wife there. We're still living in Durham, and as Bill talked about, Forest Hills being an area, I don't know if Bill remembers, but we used to ride our bicycles through Forest Hills. We used to call it Devil's Hill because they used to sick their dogs on us, and we did it as a challenge. And we would just come through that area, and we just laugh and have a good time. And what came out of that, I am now living in Forest Hills community. So there's a big change, there's a big turn, you move forward. I had the opportunity to work for Nortel Networks in the park. My last assignment was to handle the shipping, distribution, and product development for the Reman Group on product that we had. It was a $100 million business. My team was responsible for getting the product scheduled, get the product tested, and get the product shipped to our customer on a timely manner. So we enjoyed that. So those are the kind of things that helped me propel myself from Fireball, just having a relationship with him, having a relationship with his family, and having a relationship with all my friends in the community. I will never, never forget them for the times that they did things for me. And I am so grateful for that. And I do appreciate you all allowing me a time to say those things. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Betty. And right now we want to move on to Margaret Littlejohn and let her have her 7 minutes before we move forward. Thank you. Are you there, Margaret? Margaret, if you're on, you need to unmute. She there?
It's okay?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, my name is Margaret Littlejohn, and I'm from the Bottom. I lived on Matthews Street all my life from birth to 10th grade. We stayed about 4 or 5 houses on Matthews Street. We lived near the American Tobacco Company and the restaurant Nan's Cafeteria further up from the Bottom. Then we moved down towards the 500 block of Matthews Street. We stayed on a dirt street. We played softball in the street until our ball would go over the fence in Mr. Wilker Nelson's yard until the street lights came on, and we knew then that we had to come home because my mama would come outside and holler out, Gina, Sheila, Margaret, we know it's time to run home. So then another day, my sister Jean, she would always go to Risby Tire Sale to get cardboard to make her a school or a playhouse, because that's what she liked to do. And we had a coal stove, and as they say, I didn't know we were poor because we ate every day. And some foods now that we ate when I was younger, I don't eat now because we was made to eat those foods that I don't like now. And my mom had a coal stove that where she would cook her beans on. And I kept saying, why we have a coal stove? Everybody else had other stoves, but we had a coal stove, but it cooked the beans well. And on Matthew Street, we were a family. Everybody took care of everybody. I went to C.C. Spalding School, went to St. Matthew Church. We didn't have a phone, but my grandmother had a phone, and it was a party line. I didn't know what that was, but having a party line, like my daughters say now, y'all were poor, but I didn't know we were poor at that time because we had everything that we needed. We hung our clothes on the line. I still like hanging our clothes on the line, but that was family at the Bottom. Later on, we had the Bottom reunion, and our president was Sandra Howell. They call her Little Gal, and it started in 1998. That was the first Bottom reunion. Then 2016, we joined in with the South Side. It was the Bottom South Side reunion, and Steve Chalmers was our president, and still is our president of the Bottom South Side reunion. And that concludes my conversation on the Bottom. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Margaret. One of the things I'd like to actually say is that we also had Miss Bernice Scott, who was scheduled to be with us this afternoon. Unfortunately, 2 days ago, she became ill, and she's now at Duke University Medical Center. And she was trying to make every effort to see if she could actually be able to get on, but she's just not feeling up to the task. So we want to actually send all of our prayers out to her. I'm watching some of the comments, and I see we have Deidre Barnes that's sent in a comment, who's actually Ernie Barnes' daughter. And we're glad to actually have her on here today. And again, we all remember Miss Fanny Barnes and everyone down on the Willard Street area. Also, for the ones that are not really familiar with the boundaries of the bottom actually, the boundaries included Proctor Street to the north. We had Pine Street to the east, which is now Roxborough, Enterprise to the south, and over on the west side, it was Willard Street. And that was the boundaries for the bottom. And I think you've kind of heard what life was like in the bottom. I feel very privileged to have grown up in the bottom. I lived at 203 Clemens Avenue, which was right at the corner of Lakewood Avenue and South Street, right next to the Rigsby tire sales there. And I lived there with my parents, Lacey and Ruby Chalmers. My mother became a nurse and my dad was a plasterer. And my brother, Bernice Hayes, who was on the picture with Henry at Miss Mitty Austin School, and he later became a printer. We, like, as you heard earlier, we lived in a small little duplex. We had 3 rooms. And I remember that well. And as everyone said, we didn't think we were poor, but we had 1 bedroom. And my brother and I had a rollaway bed that we would fold up in the morning and put in the corner. And at night, we would take it down and we slept in the same bedroom with our parents. So, but we had a coal and wood stove in the bedroom that we had to make certain that we kept going, especially in the wintertime, because it got kind of cold up in there. We did have an oil heater in the living room. But again, that was a way of life. We had those little wooden houses, and a lot of folks called them shacks, but to us, that was home. My grandmother actually lived 1 block away from us down on Carrington Street, 721 Carrington Street, right at the corner of Carrington and Lakewood. Her brother, John Sampson, and his wife lived a block from us, and her sister, Miss Beulah Lewis, lived right next door, and all of her kids. My dad's sister lived across the street, Mamie Boyd, and all of her kids. But really, and also the Privettes, who lived up on Chestnut Streets, were cousins. But the thing of it is that in the bottom, everyone was family. Not just blood related, it was family. And everywhere we went, we were taken care of. My education, like some of the others, started at Miss Mitty Austin. I was 6 years behind my brother. So she was out there for a long time, and every year she would take a picture with her class. And I still have my class picture also with my classmates. But that was education. I went to Lyon Park School for 3 years. And I remember, I think probably one of my most famous teachers, and one that's probably closest and dearest in my heart, was Miss Mary Grant. And she was the one that really taught all of her kids in the 1st grade that we were special. And that's one of the things that I remember. I went to C.C. Spalding from the 4th to the 6th grade. And again, in the 5th grade, I had Miss Nancy Rice, who later became Miss Nancy Rowland. And again, she was an avid sports fan, played softball. She was one of the few women that I ever see could knock the softball out of the Hillside Park. But she also taught all of her kids that we were special and we didn't have to settle for best. Of course, she left and went to North Carolina Central University, where she continued to help kids get a good education. So again, and I'll jump right on to high school. I played at Hillside High School band. I was in the first, my graduating class was the 1st year integrated class at Hillside, class of 1971. Clark Edgerton was our band director. And one of the things, again, that he taught us that we were the best at that when any race of kids to come in, we could hold our own, and we demonstrated that. So, I mean, to me, I was just a proud resident of the bottom. I left and went to A&T after high school, where I played in the band there. And actually, when we went to A&T, if you graduated from Hillside and played in the band, you didn't have to even try out at A&T. You were automatically in the band. So these are just some of the memories. But the one thing that we remember, and it's been alluded to, is that we had a lot of businesses in the bottom. We had grocery stores, We had individuals, but we think we had the winning recipe for success. A lot of people attribute Hillary Clinton with it takes a village to raise a child, but that concept and that philosophy goes back to our roots. And in the bottom, we had the village. No one parent or set of parents raised a kid in the bottom. You were raised by the entire community, and that's one of the things that made us strong. And so I think we had the elders who lived in the community who looked after the kids, and they were sitting on the porch watching and providing guidance. We didn't have a father in every home, but we had enough fathers in the community to teach young boys how to become men. At my house, we had horseshoes. My dad taught the boys in the neighborhood how to build wagons. But pretty much, like I said, we had ladies who taught young mothers how to be mothers and how to be wives. And even my grandmother delivered a child in the community. Miss Lily Hayes, she actually delivered Miss Shirley Thompson, Shirley and Arthur Thompson's daughter, Penny, if anybody remember her from the bottom. My grandmother delivered her. And but that's what community was all about. We had good role models. My Uncle Pete, as he mentioned, Pete Hayes, played Negro League baseball, football at Central. But again, we had good role models. We had some of the same problems we have now in communities, but at the same time, we were still strong, vibrant community, and we were moving forward. So that's, some of the things that I remember from just being in the bottom is just the fact that we were moving in the right direction. We were on track. And I know a lot of people talk about urban renewal and how it came through the 147 expressway, and it did disrupt life as we knew it. And but at the same time, I think that we know what we had and we know what it took to get us to where we were. And we should not allow what happened with urban renewal, what happened with 147, even what's happening with gentrification to define who we are and to disrupt our lives. I think we as African Americans know that it takes the village to raise kids. It takes the village for us to kind of come together and make things happen. And that's one of the things that we need to kind of move back. We still have some avid warriors in the community. I think back at Ray Urquhart, who continued to live in that community and work for the city of Durham and fight for equal rights and housing and so forth for the community. And Marie Hunter, who was at his side through that entire fight. So we still have warriors who are out there. We still have those who are committed to working in the community and again, making certain that we do not lose that legacy. We're very pleased that we have a very strong reunion every other year now. We started out having them every year. Of course, COVID has disrupted that. But we have over 200 people that come to our reunions each year. And they come from as far as California. And we have actually brought the bottom and the entire south side together, which moved that boundary from actually Enterprise on over to Roxborough Street at the bottom near C.C. Spalding. But because all of us basically were classmates and friends during that time. But the thing of it is that, it would be great if I think we could bring all of those communities back together, all the people, and put a plan together, because as a people, we really need to go back and recapture what we had during that time period when we had less, but at the same time, we had the most. So I'm going to stop right there because I know our time is probably about running out. And if there's some questions and some comments, and again, we got a lot of the old classmates and things that are actually chiming on.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chalmers. You actually touched on a couple of the questions there at the end, asking about what happened to the bottom. And so thank you for covering that. And another question from the chat: do any of the panelists have memories of their parents speaking of when the American Tobacco Rail Line was laid down?
Okay, anybody can unmute who wants to respond. I have no knowledge, I don't have any memory of the rail line. That was before my time. I don't think I know. We used to walk the railroad tracks to school, and I've been caught on the middle of that railroad track a couple of times while the train was coming, but that's about the only memories that I have.
What did she ask?
About the tobacco rail line that was laid. Do you remember hearing anything about that? Your parents talking about that?
I think I used to hear my granddaddy talk about, he worked at the factory for about 50 years. And first 50 years, I think they were in existence. And I heard him talk about how they laid those rails to bring the trains up in there to bring and carry tobacco goods and all that stuff through and to and from Durham to other areas and all. I just remember him talking about that. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Mr. Patterson.
Mm-hmm.
Another question in the chat is, do you guys have any memories of Dr. Lucinda Macaulay Harris, who started Durham College with a 5-year-old typewriter on Pine Street?
No, I do not.
I think I vaguely remember a little about that because I think later on it was tied into a business college and business schools from that effort, and I think she was one that started that forefront thinking about business and typewriters and stuff and teaching it and all. Yeah.
If we can go back to the question dealing with the rail line for the American Tobacco Company, I was fortunate enough when my first job out of college was to work with the buying organization for American Tobacco Company. Now you're talking about a city kid, never saw tobacco, never worked on a farm, and they sent me to Mullins, South Carolina. And what that was for us to work with the buyers to buy the product out of the warehouse. And then we had to pack it up and send it to Durham, Richmond, Virginia, and Lexington, Kentucky. So those rail lines were in place, I know, up through the late 70s and early 80s before the American Tobacco Company started to have someone else to purchase their tobacco. Mm-hmm. But that was an interesting experience for me, and it taught me a lot. So I really enjoyed it.
Another question is about the Gear Cemetery. Were people from the bottom buried there?
I'm sorry, what was that?
The Gear Cemetery here in Durham. Do you know of anyone buried there?
I don't think anyone from the bottom per se, not during my time. I think a lot of that predated my time. I've actually been there. I've done some cleanup projects over at Gear Cemetery, and but I'm not familiar. I think that was probably right near or right after slavery that it was used as a black cemetery, but not to my knowledge. And I'm glad we're getting actually comments. My friend John Shep had, we talked a lot about the bottom in the past, and he actually put a comment in there about when I would come home from school, I'd mentioned we have to stop 5-6 places at least to show our report card. Mm-hmm. But again, that was the type of commitment that we had with the bottom. You had to stop with certain people who expected you to stop and show them your report card, and you might get a nickel or something like that. But again, it just speaks to the village concept and how we grew up and how strong the community was.
Yeah. Oh, can I add this? There was a guy came out that neighborhood called Nathaniel Pierre, and Anybody remember back in the day when they used to watch them cowboy movies, Lassie LaRue? He was an actor and a horse trainer, and he participated in rope twirling and all that, and he was always in those cowboy movies back in those days, and also was a great photographer. And now his family owns a horse ranch and stuff out in Kansas. But he was, because of his light complexion and everything, and his hair, he was able to be in a lot of those cowboy movies that back in that day. Nathaniel Pierre, and he passed off as being as of a white or either a Indian or something in those movies with horses and twirling rope and all that. So he was quite famous, and his family owns a ranch out in Kansas now during that time. And he was always in our parades. We had the guy, you remember, always pranced in the parades on the horse. In the parades we had.
Thank you so much, Mr. Patterson. We want to be respectful of everyone's time. We are so close here coming to an end, but we want to definitely thank the panelists. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining us and telling the stories of the Bottom. So just want to say thank you on behalf of Neighborhood Improvement Services and our community engagement team.